99.1. All right, let's start off by me saying, fuck you, Lance, and your bullshit talking points that you get from fucking Hannity and Mick Mulvaney.
I'm offended.
Yeah, but fucking, all right, 2.5 fucking years ago, Trump wasn't president, and I didn't fucking have cancer. I just got diagnosed with kidney cancer. And I'm not saying that Trump is responsible, but I've been having digestive distress for all 2 years, even before, since he got elected. That's, I've been just uncontrollably shitting. You can say I've got Trump derangement syndrome, but really, fucking Trump has Trump derangement syndrome. And now I've got this 3-centimeter tumor in me. It's stage 1A, so it probably won't kill me. They're going to cut it out in a couple weeks, I hope, if they get their shit together. I'm waiting to get scheduled. But fucking the cancer, the cancer is pretty much Trump. The tumor is fucking, it's red like Trump, it's angry like Trump, it serves no purpose except for its own self-interest like Trump, and it will kill me if it's not dealt with like Trump will kill the fucking country. All right.
Look, even though you have cancer, you still have to hold the pose. So please don't move your head, all right?
All right.
All right. So was that it?
Well, just that Mick Mulvaney
just don't
fucking...
move your head.
All right, you fucking made a point that we don't need to see Trump's taxes because Trump was elected without showing his taxes. And then, I thought that was bullshit, and I thought it was double bullshit when I heard Mick Mulvaney say that same shit on the Sunday political talk shows. I'm like, that's where you got that bullshit talking point. And fucking, I'm just so sick of bullshit talking points. Physically, literally sick.
Well, you're right. It's an interesting point. Can you lower your head? Just kind of crouch a little bit into your head. That's it. Actually, raise your shoulder up. I'm trying to figure out. Well, now you're extending your head. That's it. Yeah. You should be doing that more. Now straight. Just make it more vertical. Don't tilt it down. And can you raise your shoulder?
A little bit.
All right. So my drawing's all screwed up.
All right.
All right. So let's get back to it. Did I? Was I using a talking point? Actually, I was. Because I was listening. And one of the Republicans very helpfully said, look, they asked for his tax returns during the election. He didn't give it to them. So clearly people didn't care. So, in other words, if the American people knew that we went through this whole thing already, and the American people said, we don't need to see his taxes, so why do the Democrats need to see his taxes?
Well, most Americans did not vote for Trump. And the law says that Congress has an absolute right to get the tax returns if they request them. This law that why shouldn't we see the tax returns? You're saying it's an invasion of privacy, but the guy has traded off his financial acumen for his entire career. And the New York Times did a story on how the Trump family avoided nearly $500 million in inheritance taxes through tax fraud, through misstating the values of their properties. Trump's older sister, who's 82, just had to retire as a judge to stop an investigation into her part in the Trump family tax fraud. We have a right to see his taxes. There are all sorts of questions about Trump's financial entanglements, and given that there's the clear legal basis to see his fucking taxes, we should see his taxes.
Okay. I'm kind of surprised that this is such a big deal to you. It seems to me that if a president is in office and the IRS announces that they're going to have to prosecute him because his taxes are so horrifying that he's clearly an immoral person and they're going to have to go to trial over it and indict him, then I would say, by God, let's see his taxes.
Or this is another bullshit talking point.
No, but it's not. I'm just thinking. I'm thinking it up right now. What I'm saying is, it seems to me that under those circumstances, I guess it would be fine to demand his taxes. But given that he hasn't done anything that the IRS thought was actionable, I don't see why it's the other party's business to start going into the guy that I voted for's taxes. In other words, I voted for the guy, and you know what? I don't want my candidate, my president that I voted for, subjected to this kind of anal cavity search by a bunch of sore loser Democrats that couldn't win at the ballot box. It's not. In other words, there is a big difference between the IRS announcing, wow, Trump is a tax fraudulent person who needs to be prosecuted and put in irons, and the other party saying, you know what, we don't like your fucking orange face. We're going to go after your tax returns and publish them on the front page of every newspaper.
Today on the fucking talk show, Sunday talk show, said that Trump shouldn't have to show his taxes because the Democrats in Congress are too stupid to understand his taxes because he's such a fucking financial genius. The New York Times did this investigation. It took, I don't know, a couple of years where they found out, if you believe the New York Times and their reporters,
oh yeah,
that Trump's family did financial bullshit, undervalued the values of their properties to avoid paying taxes on $1 billion of wealth that was passed on from the dad, Fred Trump, down to the kids. Man, you know, the IRS doesn't catch everything. In fact, the IRS has been so fucking scaled back by government, the IRS has been hamstrung. And you know, they don't have the person. You
don't think the IRS has the personnel to?
I'm saying the IRS won't catch everything, and
they won't catch Trump in his. They don't have enough people or experts to find something wrong with Trump's taxes. Is that your argument, Rick?
I'm saying that. No, I'm not saying that entirely. I'm saying that the IRS is not the sole arbiter of what is of interest in his tax.
No, it should be the Democrat Party that is the arbiter.
No, the people should. In fact, the people won't see his taxes.
I hope not.
Even if Congress requests his taxes, that doesn't mean that the American people get to see them. But somebody should take a look at them.
Why? It's none of their business unless the IRS finds something.
If we elected a motherfucker who helped defraud the U.S. out of, now you can disagree with the estate tax, but there is still an estate tax, and if we elected a guy who helped commit fraud to the tune of more than $450 million of taxes that they avoided paying on the estate illegitimately, that's something of interest.
Actually, no, Rick. What's of interest is not what the New York Times says about his taxes or your taxes or my taxes. What is of interest is what the final judgment is of the IRS and the court. If the IRS and the courts find Trump guilty of tax evasion, then he should be prosecuted once he leaves office. So I don't understand why it's any of your business or Nancy Pelosi's business or the New York Times business. I don't understand why you want to live in a world where they've got that much power. Don't interrupt me. It was a rhetorical question. I don't understand why you can't let it be that you lost the election and now there's a guy in office that you don't like. And that means that your party can't persecute the guy by looking into every possible thing they can do to smear him. I don't want to use the IRS to smear my political opponents because I think it's dirty. I would rather that the Democrats were so persuasive on having such fine programs that in a year and a half they can vote him out of office and replace him with somebody much more wonderful instead of going into his tax returns because they're a bunch of dirty scum.
He's dirty scum and he persecutes us.
No,
he's not. He's a fucking financial criminal. He is.
Prove it. Here's the internet. Prove it on the internet. Prove it on the internet. Here you go. Stop everything.
Let's see.
Prove it on the internet.
And let's talk about the election of 2016.
Prove it.
You've forever been saying that there were 3 million votes cast by shadowy illegal aliens, just voting double and triple time, even though there are numerous investigations that haven't substantiated any of that. And I've failed to bring up. But this past week, the Department of Justice and the FBI revised their number of states that the Russians had attempted, in which the Russians had attempted to infiltrate voting systems. They raised it from 21 states that the FBI and DOJ knows that the Russians tried to infiltrate, from 21 to all 50 states. The Russians attempted to get in to every single state voting system.
Did the Russians influence your vote, Lance?
That's not the deal. That they were trying to.
There's one Trump voter here, so let's see if did the Russian agent come visit you, Lance?
Listen, you're not allowed to help me.
No, it's a legitimate point.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
you make a point for me, you got to make a point for him.
No, it's not a point for him.
No, but I'm saying the Russians attempted to infiltrate the machinery and the software of the voting record-keeping systems in every one of our U.S. states. I don't know about the District of Columbia.
So wait, it is your opinion. It's your opinion that the Russians added votes to the Trump...
No, let me say what my opinion is.
Okay.
All right. So they've said, and I will grant you that there is no forensic trail of the Russians actually flipping votes. There's no forensic... They didn't leave fingerprints. However, there's no forensic trail, and I've hesitated to bring this up because it's complicated. But I will bring it up, and we can fight about it or not, but in statistics, there's a thing called the law of large numbers. That is, if you've got a fair coin, the more times you flip it, the closer the total number of heads will get to 50%. Like if you flip a coin...
No, I understand.
All right.
If you flip a coin 3 times, it could very easily come up tails each time.
Right.
But if you flip a coin 1,000 times, it'll probably be 500 tails, 500 heads.
Right. So after the election, some fairly sophisticated statisticians took a look at counties in the U.S. that didn't follow the law of large numbers. That is, that say a precinct was 54% Trump and 46% Clinton. You would expect, say a county went that way, or 54-46 Trump over Clinton. You would expect statistically, and this was borne out by most of the counties in the U.S., that the larger the precinct in that county, or in whatever other demographically homogeneous, relatively homogeneous subset of the geographic subset you're looking at, you'd expect that the larger the precinct, the closer it would be to the overall vote. That is, if you had a precinct with 2 people in it, that precinct could have voted 2 for Trump or 2 for Clinton. It could have been anything. But if that precinct had 20,000 people in it, you'd expect the 20,000 votes to have roughly gone to 54% Trump, 46 Clinton, if that's the overall average. Now, of course, there'd be little deviations from it. But in general, most districts in the U.S. followed the law of large numbers. But they found a bunch of these, several dozen, and maybe more.
Excuse me, we're hearing you down here.
Sorry.
This project to analyze voting patterns found more than a dozen swing districts, districts in swing states that didn't follow the law of large numbers, where instead the larger the precinct, the more people voted for Trump within the same geographic area, which the statisticians argue is the way to flip. If you're trying to hide flipped votes, that's how you do it. You wouldn't want to flip votes in small precincts because they'd be more apparent. So you'd want to flip your votes in larger precincts, but that would lead to a violation of the law of large numbers, and they found these violations in a bunch of swing states. Now, I can't, we can argue about it, and it's never going to change a thing, but I will say that there's a non-negligible amount of circumstantial evidence that says that the vote may not have been entirely clean. Then you can also argue that no large election has ever been entirely clean. But you like to say 3 million invisible illegal aliens voted for Clinton. And I like to say, there's some statistical evidence that there was vote flipping.
Look, Rick, let's just go with the most recent James O'Keefe thing. He just found dozens of fraudulent Democrat voters just this week. It's April the 14th, and James O'Keefe just produced another video where he found hundreds of, I said dozens, he found many new people that were voting twice, particularly in the swing states.
Now, how did he do it? Because James O'Keefe is the guy who went to prison for a little while for
No, the Democrats prosecuted him. And
legitimately. And
I think they here's the thing, Rick. Every time I come up with somebody.
Yeah, but James O'Keefe is a guy who actually went to fucking prison for
and
fraudulent video.
And so did Tommy Robinson.
So all these people are fucking martyrs of
Congressman Getz drinks too much. And Nunez, you've got something shitty to say about him. In other words, Rick, what the Democrats have trained you to do is instead of dealing with the argument, you just have something shitty to say about the person. That usually is just a Democrat smear. Now, we can look at James O'Keefe's new video.
What does it say?
It says that there are people double voting for the Democrats in all the swing states. He calls them journalists, undercover journalists in all those states, and he's found a whole new swath of them.
What is on the
I can
video?
show you the video if you want to
Well,
see
just
it.
describe it.
He interviews people that voted twice and said, why did you do this? And they said, well, I've got a house in both states, so I figured I'd vote twice. And they got away with it. But beyond that, there's an even more telling thing. And that is the Democrats around the country are actually instituting, they're talking about legislation, and I think they've instituted legislation in order to actually get illegals to vote.
Oh, horseshit.
No, but if I can find that, will you vote for Trump?
No.
Okay, I can find right now on the internet machine, I can find Democrat legislation that is designed to have illegal aliens vote. Non-citizens vote.
All right, I need a break anyway, so
All right,
fucking
let's look
find
it
that
up.
shit.
I'll find it.
No, but I feel like we don't need to fucking. I don't need to have my shirt off to look at this shit.
If I could find something that shows that the Democrats are in favor of letting illegal aliens vote. Now, I first looked it up on Wikipedia, and I found that the Democrats are allowing illegal aliens to vote in
Like school board
in
elections.
school board elections, in Minnesota, little things, in some of the Northeast states like Maine, Maryland, New Hampshire, those little places, and they're sneaking it in. It's school board elections, so even Rick knows about it.
Well, all right.
Now,
There's no
Now,
reason that you can't.
Hang on. This is Fox News, which Rick will hate.
No, but let me
But on March
talk
8th
about that first point there. Like, it's not a hard and fast rule that undocumented immigrants can't vote in certain things. They could vote if People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive was based on a vote. They could vote. If American Idol is based on a public vote, they can vote. If your school board wants to say, hey, let's let we have a lot of kids of undocumented immigrants going to school here, let's let them vote in this little local election.
Okay,
I don't think
Rick.
there's a law against that.
Okay, that's fine, Rick. You're proving my point. Now, another point is that they're letting them vote in local elections.
Also, there's no rule that says a golden retriever can't be president. That's why Air Bud could actually be president.
Okay.
Right? There's nothing in the Constitution.
So they're allowing in. I forgot all the states, but I think it's Minnesota, New Hampshire, California. They're letting illegals vote in local elections and school board elections. Now, this was so upsetting to the Republicans who love America that on March the 8th, they attempted to get a bill through adding language to H.R. 1 election proposal, March 8th, allowing that illegal immigrants the right to vote devalues the franchise and diminishes the voting power of United States citizens. Every single Democrat voted that down.
Well, wait, what does that law actually stipulate?
It just says that.
So it's just a statement. It doesn't make any new rules.
It is a statement that condemns illegal immigrants having the right to vote.
All right. Well, let me
That's
just
the
talk
language.
about what
So
happens.
do you need to look it up, or do you trust me?
I trust that, but let me slightly rebut that. Like,
so you
there's a
lied. You were wrong.
well, I mean, it's fucking local elections. I don't think undocumented immigrants should have the right to vote in state or national elections.
My argument was based on the idea that the Republicans are trying to stop illegals from voting, and the Democrats are trying to help illegals vote.
All right, fine. Let me talk about what's called the dance of the lemons in the LA public school system, and I think other school districts.
Okay, if you're going to do that, then you got to take off your shirt because it's going to irritate the hell out of me. It's completely irrelevant, but then at least I'll be able to draw.
Okay, all right. So in the LA public school systems, it's really hard to fire certain teachers and administrators, even if they suck ass. So what they do is, like, there are activists.
This side, you're shooting over my hand.
All right.
But
If you're on this side, you're shooting. If you're on
Okay.
that side, you're shooting over my head.
let
You
me
can't
move all
see.
this stuff first.
So just move on to this side.
All right, so
All right, go ahead with
all right,
your.
all right, good. So there are
Lower your head.
little school districts,
Yes.
or there are schools that have a lot of white affluent parents who are very involved in the school. And they track what's going on in the school, and they know who to contact if they find out that there's a sucky administrator or a sucky teacher. They're not afraid to make noise. They know who to call, and they make noise, and that sucky administrator or teacher gets transferred out of that school. It's hard to get them fired, so they stick them in a school where the parents are poorer, and more of them are not native English speakers. And so these schools get fucked over because they end up with the shitty staff. And it's correlated with, with affluence, with speaking English, and I assume that is correlated with the schools that get fucked over having more parents who are undocumented immigrants. So when you give undocumented immigrants some ability to get involved with the affairs of their kids' schools, that seems not unreasonable to me. And yeah, you're letting undocumenteds vote, like in these places, you're letting undocumented people have a say in how their schools are run.
Okay. Well, you're letting illegal aliens vote. The Democrats are for it. The Republicans are against it. I think I won that one. Can we go on
I
to
guess,
something
except
else?
we're not talking about voting for senators.
Guilty with an excuse, eh, Rick?
I don't know. Well, yeah, let's talk about, tonight was the premiere of the final season of Game of Thrones.
All right, let me put the thing on.
All right.
Hold on.
So,
Well, hold on. I got a thing to say, and then you can say your stuff. Because you have amazing theories about Game of Thrones.
I do.
And I just have a fucking anti-Trump quibble tied to Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Where Game of Thrones makes evil seem super sexy, like Cersei. I'm too cheap to have HBO.
Don't move your head.
All right, so I don't know everything, but I know Cersei's like the incest queen, right?
Yes.
And she makes incest with her brother, who's hot for a boy. They make it look good, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking of it myself, except that my sister doesn't look like Cersei, and she's related to me, so it's not as interesting.
All right, but anyway, on Game of Thrones, evil is glamorous and fascinating. But in real life, evil makes chocolate pecan pies and goes on the Sunday morning talk shows and says that the Democrats are too stupid to understand Trump's taxes. You got Sarah Sanders, you got Steve Bannon, you've got Stephen Miller. These are people that you wouldn't even glance at a second time if you passed them in the aisles of a grocery store. Evil is, but I think Hannah Arendt was a writer who wrote about the Nuremberg Nazi trials, who talked about the banality of evil. And in real life, evil is not so interesting, and evil gets away with stuff by saying the same shit over and over again, the same lies over and over, until people are just so bored with it, they're like, ugh, all right, okay.
Like Trump colluded with Russia.
Well, we don't know yet, but that shit's been going on for 2.5 years.
That's still a tough one for you, huh, Rick?
Well,
Yeah,
actually, we'll
figure
get to
it
that.
out.
Hold on, we'll get to it. We'll have a whole big argument about that,
okay.
and more wait and see and stuff. But first, you do your Game of Thrones stuff.
All right. So, I don't know if I mentioned this stuff to you guys before. I think I remember saying this to someone a year ago. I don't know if it was on our show. But it bears repeating since nobody watches our show. Maybe an extra 30 people will hear it. Okay, the first thing I wanted to say was that I'm identifying things in the show that are from. You can put your arms down because I'm thinking. that are from real medieval history. And the first is in the Battle of the Bastards, the way that the bad guy looks like he's going to defeat the army of Jon Snow is actually the same tactic that was used at the Battle of Cannae by Hannibal against the Romans. What Hannibal did, he had a smaller number of men, and Hannibal had something like 30,000 men. I'm not sure the exact number, but I know the Romans had 80,000 men. And it was a massive army that outnumbered Hannibal like 3 or 4 to 1. But what Hannibal did was he lured the Romans in and surreptitiously surrounded them as they came forward.
Through a narrow pass?
No, what happened was as the Romans had this mighty army, and so Hannibal pretended to fall back before it. But as he did, his wings started to envelop this mighty army from the sides until finally it was behind it as well. And then what happened was all the guys in the middle of the massive Roman army didn't matter. It was on the outside. So imagine you've got a circle, and around the circle you've got men. Now, the people inside the circle don't matter. They can't fight. So it's just the guys on the outside fighting. And so as a result, Hannibal was able to crush the Roman army into a smaller and smaller circle, so they couldn't move their arms. They needed to move their arms. And they gradually ended up killing almost all of them. It was the greatest defeat in Roman history. And actually, there was so much blood in the soil that the wine grown in that region has a different taste, they say, because of the blood from the Battle of Cannae.
Even now?
Yeah, that's what they say, but who, can you
I think they're just trying to
now?
sell wine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, that's what happened in the Battle of the Brothers in Game of Thrones. And I bet you didn't know that. There's another thing I noticed, and that is right now, it's common knowledge for people watching Game of Thrones that Cersei, the incestuous queen, is so rotten that she's letting the armies of the North and Daenerys fight the zombies while she just watches. And you might think that it would be a stupid thing for the army of Cersei, who are in the south, the Lannisters, not to join forces to face this giant force of zombies. Except that there's a historical precedent for that that's quite famous. The Persians had another overwhelmingly large army, very imposing army, like the zombies are in the Game of Thrones right now. And the Athenians asked the help of the Spartans. And the Spartans actually made up an excuse. They said that they were having a religious ceremony and couldn't help because it was their religion. So the Athenians were forced to fight the Persians alone. Now the Spartans reasoned that they hated the Persians and the Athenians, and so they didn't help their fellow Greeks.
But they'd let them wipe themselves out.
They let them fight each other.
Which we wisely did with Iran and Iraq during the 80s and 90s. We let them fight with each other, and that provided, they spent all their forces fighting each other and provided and kept them busy so they wouldn't destabilize the rest of the Middle East.
Well, that's true. Actually, Henry Kissinger is famous for saying It's a pity that both sides can't lose. And some people think that we provided intelligence to both sides using our satellites when one side was losing, but that I'm not sure if that can ever be proven. Another thing that I'm noticing from the Game of Thrones is that the Western armies in Westeros are terrified by these Dothraki horsemen. And that actually has a historical precedence too, because throughout the Dark Ages, from the fall of the Roman Empire all the way up to the 14th century, the armies of Europe were terrified of horsemen that came from the east. And it's true in the Game of Thrones. There's Westeros and Esteros, I think, is the east. But anyway, it's armies coming from the east. And it's always armies of horsemen, because the armies in Asia and Central Asia were horse armies, whereas the armies of Europe, first under the Romans, were basically foot soldiers. They gradually began to use more and more cavalry to keep up with developments in the rest of their empire, of the known world. But they were basically foot soldiers. The Greeks, before Alexander, were basically foot soldiers. Alexander introduced horsemen that were very effective against foot soldiers. And the Romans were famously terrorized by the Huns. Well, but not because, and before that, the Romans were terrorized by the Parthians. And the Parthians and the Huns, and later on the Mongols, were all horse soldiers. The Mongols swept before them all the European foot soldier armies too, later on. The only difference that I find upsetting is that in Game of Thrones, the Dothraki are depicted carrying scimitars or curved swords, but in both the Huns, the Parthians, and the Mongols relied more on the bow, small bow and arrows that they fired from their horses. And if you can imagine a small army of men on fast horses with a bow and arrow always had the advantage over foot soldiers running around with shields and swords. So what George R.R. Martin, I think his name is depicting is very real. It's basically the fight between the horse soldier and the foot soldier.
And okay, and this can be taken forward into the 20th century when the German panzer divisions, a panzer is a fast tank. They were able to sweep in World War II through France, and because they didn't have fast tanks before. They were the first ones to do fast tanks. And then turns out that the fast horsemen with bows and arrows now are just like scruffy guys in a building in St. Petersburg who are able to be dementors and then pump out a bunch of like fucking propaganda that makes people crazy, and fucks up our elections and France's elections and Britain's elections.
I think that's a bit of a stretch. I'd like to go back to one more thing I wanted to say about Game of Thrones.
All right.
And that is that they've also correctly depicted that in the West, Westeros, there are very, very few slaves. But in the East, in Easteros, there are lots and lots of slaves. And that goes back to a Middle Eastern tradition of slavery that continued in Africa and Asia Up until today, actually, there are millions of slaves that the Muslims keep in Africa. It brought me to a very interesting point that was made by Dennis Prager this week, which is never brought out, and I wanted to mention this. Dennis Prager is an expert on the Bible and a conservative commentator. And whenever I have an argument with somebody that hates the Judeo-Christian tradition, they always say that the Bible supports slavery. And this is a fascinating point. This one of the commandments, one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not steal. And a lot of people think, well, that's fine. So God thinks it's very important that we not steal cars or maybe people's wives or
cattle
or cattle. Yeah, but it turns out that the main thing that people stole, the thing of greatest value that people stole in the Bronze Age, was other people. And of course, the biblical writers knew this. So they were the first to come up with a law saying you cannot steal, including people, which meant it was the first law against slavery. And that ties in with the fact that the early Jews had something called manumission and jubilee. And what that was if for some reason you captured enemy prisoners, you had to release them in the 7th year. So even if you did have a slave, there were rules for treating the slave fairly. You couldn't beat your slave, for example, and you had to release them after a certain period of time, 7 years. Also, it got harder and harder and harder to keep slaves. So that's why when people say the Judeo-Christians support slavery, well, it mentions that people had slaves, but it never says that that's the way it should be. In the same way that it mentions people have adultery, people kill their fathers, people do all kinds of things in the Bible, but it's not saying that's how it should be. All right, so
that's why I have 2 points.
Yes.
One is, yes, last week...
So if you're going to make points, you need to pose.
All right, last week we talked about whether the Jews are still considered the chosen people. And I realized a couple days ago that that's just a really dumb thing. That the Jews should be the chosen people, just for rhyming purposes. God says, I choose Jews, so we're the chosen people. It's just
I think that's a good point.
All right. Point number 2 is...
Although
Thank you. All right.
Although there are a lot of people that say that Jewish women are not that choosy.
No.
When it comes to who they sleep with.
I haven't heard that. I've heard others. But anyway.
Well, I know they never liked me.
Well,
so I guess I'm just being bitter.
No. Today is my 28th wedding anniversary with the only Jew I ever went out with.
Interesting. So you're contributing.
Yeah. All right. Thing 2 is...
But by the way, as a Jew, you guys don't know this, watching this, but we're a dying race. And so I'm very proud of Rick for producing another Jew. He really did a good job. Rick, ironically, has done more for Judaism than I ever will, even though he's non-practicing.
Yeah, I don't know how it works demographically, but I assume that fewer and fewer, people of all types are marrying within their race or religion. So people like to argue that, like if you read science fiction of the 50s, a lot of things present futures where everybody is like a vague mix of everything.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think that. Anyway, the robots will fuck us up before that happens. So I wonder if anybody's done the math on how many people have been killed overall, an estimate in Game of Thrones, because you have these vast armies clashing. And I assume that the overall death count is in the millions. But the takeaway from that for me is, because I mean that's accurate when compared to history, where everybody dies, and most people live miserably and die miserably, and one of the projects of Western civilization has been to extend islands of fairness to cover more and more of the world, right? Democracy, capitalism, all the tools of Western civilization is to reduce the overall misery in the world. Okay. But the statistically, if you look at the whole history of humanity, you're lucky to live in one of those islands of civilization. Which I think makes an argument for the U.S. trying to maintain technological superiority, which we were talking about last week.
Okay.
Because there's going to be a new set of citizens entering the world. And these are going to be the augmented people and also sophisticated autonomous AIs and alliances between the two. And when we start getting a whole frickin' menagerie of entities that are as smart or smarter than regular unaugmented humans, there are going to be situations where regular humans like us in the future are going to get fucked over by the super citizens of the future. And I want the U.S. to be at the forefront of technology, to remain at the forefront, because we're going to have to make rules for the ethics of conscious entities. Because not only are humans going to get fucked over in the future, but sophisticated other entities will get fucked over. And we need to develop an ethics of conscious beings, a way for everybody to coexist in this zoo of the future.
Well, I'm convinced that the Democrats will want to make sure that they have the right to vote, so long as they're programmed to vote Democrat. So you're speaking like a true Democrat. You're already worried about the rights of these.
No, I'm worried about human rights, because when our robot overlords, we want to be able to. We want Western values to help, and the golden rule to help inform an ethics of conscious beings.
You really worry about this stuff, Rick?
Yeah, because it's coming. There's no way it's not fucking coming in the next 100 years, next 150 years, next 200 years.
But aren't there more pressing issues?
Well, you go crazy every week about immigration issues,
Yes.
and you like to say that the estimates of the number of undocumented immigrants in the country, according to Pew and the government, around 10.5 million. You like to say no, that there's a gazillion, there's an army of hidden ones that. So
we just got 100,000 this month.
All right, but anyway, we're a country of 325 million people.
Yeah, but if we get 100,000 a month, how long will it take for there to be millions and millions?
At 100,000 a month, and I don't think we're letting in the whole 100,000.
Yeah, but if they have a child with them, we have to let them in, according to the Democrats.
All right, so let's just say, for the sake of argument.
Yeah, let's
all right,
do
so that's 1.2 million a year, which is 1/3 of 1% of the U.S. population.
Okay, but if we keep that up for 10 years, how many is that?
3% of the U.S. population.
Okay, and Trump won by about, what, 1%?
Well, no, actually, Trump won by negative 1/2 of 1%.
Excellent. So if you get this 3% spread around the country,
I'm sorry,
if you get the Democrats, if you get them spread around the country,
No,
if
wait,
you
so,
move
no,
them-
no, I fucked up the math. Trump won by negative 3 million votes out of 130 million,
Okay.
which is negative 2.5%.
Okay, so if we get another 10 million illegals into the country,
Well,
and we give them the vote, we put them in Republican districts, then the Democrats will never lose another election. So it's perfect. In 10 years, the Democrats will have total control over the country by your math.
yeah,
Now, that's one of the reasons that Trump actually made a brilliant suggestion this month. He actually said, you know, if we're going to bring these illegals in, because we can't get rid of them, because the Democrats have passed laws that they can't,
so
that
put
they
them in
don't have to
sanctuary
stay.
cities.
Yeah, he was saying, look, well, let's just put them in San Francisco where they're going to vote Democrat anyway, because what happens is the Democrats have worked it out, so they send the weird thing. Now, I'm going to talk, so don't interrupt me. All week, people were saying how outrageous this is, that he's just trying to get even with the Democrats and putting them in their backyards. But the truth is, what the Obama administration was doing was getting huge numbers of people they claimed were refugees out of Africa, for example. They actually got a whole village from Africa and stuck it somewhere in the Midwest. And that's how they were able to turn Minnesota deep blue. Somalis. They also were shipping people in from around the world. If they got into America, they were putting them on buses and dragging them out into the interior, into the red states, so that they could give them the vote and turn the red states blue.
Yeah.
So not only does this get even with the Democrats, but it actually just says, look, why are you putting them in blue states? Why can't we put them why are you putting them in red states where they can affect the election? Why don't we put these new illegal aliens, these asylum seekers, why don't we put them in San Francisco and Beverly Hills
Was Trump really using the voting argument on this, or was he just saying we're going to put these people in sanctuary cities to fuck you up because I don't like you?
Well, what he was saying was this.
He wasn't talking about the vote. He was just
Can
talking
you let
about,
me speak, please?
Okay.
Because he asked me a question.
Yeah.
He was saying that if you insist that we can't have them stay in Mexico while they wait for their hearing, and if you insist that if they have a child with them, they have to be let into the United States, then why do they have to be put in Republican districts? You can have them, because all the Democrats have been saying is that illegal aliens help keep cities safer, healthier, and better educated. I've heard this from 3 different Democrat politicians this week. So why not give them to Beverly Hills? It'll make Beverly Hills safer, better educated, and healthier. Yes, Rick?
It's punitive horse shit. B,
Why is it punitive? I thought you loved illegal aliens. I thought last week you were telling me that you were full of love and that you have more love than I do because you love illegal aliens. So are you telling me that there's something wrong with illegal aliens? That you don't want them near you in your Democrat districts? How dare you? You are a racist.
Trump wants to dump undocumented immigrants.
That you love in your neighborhood. What's
Fine,
wrong
but
with that?
Trump doesn't love them. Trump doesn't love
It's
them.
none of your business. Who cares whether he loves them or not? Do you want him
Because
in your
Trump
neighborhood?
is the dumper.
Do you want him in your neighborhood with your children or not? Don't you love illegal aliens, Rick?
I like, we've, as somebody who has lived in LA now for 30 years.
Can you be in the pose, please?
Yeah,
We are doing a drawing here.
30 years.
Yes.
And in that time, we've had people, we've worked with people whose immigration status we haven't fully ascertained.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, we actually love these people.
Well, great. Do you live in an illegal alien neighborhood? Because I do.
No. we
Well,
prefer to live
get
in
used to
Studio
it.
City.
I want you to live in an illegal alien neighborhood. Because in my neighborhood, there are thousands and thousands of illegal aliens. And I'll tell you something. It makes the crime rate is very high. The schools are very bad. And the emergency rooms are full. So I want you to experience that in your neighborhood.
You just said that that undocumented, or you call them illegals, cause all these problems.
Yes,
right?
they do.
So, and Trump agrees with you. He does.
Okay.
He fucking does.
All right.
So when he wants to gift
Uh-huh.
sanctuary cities with these people, he's not doing it out of love. He's not doing those cities a favor, at least in his point of view. He's like saying, fuck you, here comes the tempest toss. Enjoy him.
But Rick, I don't care.
But
No, I don't care what his motive is. Maybe he's doing it because he loves Democrats and wants them to be happy with their brethren. Maybe he's doing it because he hates Democrats. You know what, Rick? It doesn't matter. It's a policy. Do you want that policy? Do you want the policy to be instituted? For whatever reason. Who cares? This is the point. As a Democrat, you got no policies. You have no arguments. All you can do is criticize Trump. I don't care how much you hate Trump. It doesn't matter what his motives are. Do you want
I hate him this much. I hate him the size of the fucking tumor I grew in the past 2 years of his fucking presidency.
Listen, because of the Democrats' policies, we just got 100,000 new illegal aliens this month. Do you want to put them in your neighborhood? Please. Do you want them to be in your neighborhood? We can put them in your neighborhood, or we can put them in my neighborhood.